Why did the two men walk into the diner like they owned it? It was late afternoon at Silver Creek, the quiet lull after the lunch rush, when most of the regulars had gone back to their jobs. Sunlight slanted through the big front windows, glinting off half-empty coffee cups and the chrome edges of stools. Behind the counter, Lisandre, to everyone here, moved like clockwork, refilling mugs, clearing plates, offering a soft nod to the handful of truckers, retirees, and young families who always drifted in and out of Fort Campbell's orbit. For 14 months she had blended into this place so perfectly that no one ever thought to question her. Just another diner worker, just another woman making a living. That was the way she wanted it. No questions, no attention. But the moment the door opened and the two Delta operators stepped inside, the stillness broke. They didn't just enter, they took possession. Zephr Gredell walked with a heavy arrogance in his shoulders, a kind of swagger that only came from years of being told he was the sharpest knife in the drawer. Steel-gray eyes, the build of a fighter and the smirk of someone who liked being watched. His partner, Kai's Fenbomb, carried himself differently, quieter, heavier in the step, as if used to walking in someone else's shadow. Both wore civilian clothes, but everything about them screamed military. The cropped hair, the wary scanning of exits, the coiled readiness, even here, in a place that served pie by the slice. Lisa noticed them the way one notices an approaching storm, calmly, carefully, without letting her eyes linger. They sat at the counter. Zephr made sure to sit just where he could watch her every movement. Lisa brought the coffee pot as she always did, her motions precise, economical. Coffee, her voice was soft but carried, free of tremor. "Sure thing, sweetheart," Zephr answered, dripping condescension. He leaned forward on his elbows, studying her like an insect under glass. "You been working here long?" "Long enough." She poured their cups without a spill, without even the faintest clink of the pot against ceramic. To anyone else, she was nothing more than a waitress doing her job. But Gredell had that instinct, the predator's instinct. Something about her neatness, her composure, stirred a suspicion he couldn't quite name. As Lisa reached to refill the sugar dispenser, her sleeve rolled up just enough to show the edge of ink, a fragment of something dark. And that was the moment everything shifted. Gredell's hand shot out, fast, far too familiar. He caught her wrist before she could withdraw. Well, what do we have here?" The diner quieted, the air heavy with that one action. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered over plates. Lisa froze, not pulling, not pushing, not reacting at all. Only her eyes changed, sharpening ever so slightly. He yanked her sleeve higher, revealing the tattoo in full. A raven in flight, wings outstretched, claws gripping a lightning bolt. Below it, the words in Gothic ink, Task Force Echo. For a second, the place seemed to breathe as one. Gredell laughed, too loud, too harsh. "You've got to be kidding me." He twisted her wrist just enough to assert dominance. "What is this? A band logo, some video game guild. Maybe your little boyfriend thought he was clever giving you fake operator ink." "Kais," he said to his partner, "get a look at this. Task Force Echo, that's not even a real unit." He turned to the room, making a show of it. "Everybody, check this out. Little Lisa here thinks she's some kind of warrior princess." Kais shifted uncomfortably. His eyes flicked from the tattoo to her face, then away again. Something in her stillness made him uneasy. "Please let go of my arm." Lisa's voice was calm. No anger, no fear, just calm. "Oh, I hurt your feelings." Gredell leaned in closer. His grip tightened. "Listen, sweetheart, I've been doing this for 8 years. Delta, the real thing. I know every unit worth knowing. And this," he tapped her tattoo with a mocking finger, "this is stolen valor." The words were venom. They filled the diner with a silence that burned. Even the old waitress Dorothy froze by the register, her hand hovering over the phone. Lisa's eyes didn't flinch. She had heard worse, much worse. But still, the accusation burrowed deep, dragging up memories she had buried. The roar of gunfire on the outskirts of Aleppo, the blood of civilians staining her hands, The crackle of comms that went dead too soon. She pressed it back down like she always did. The silence cracked, not from her, not from him, but from outside. Engines, heavy, synchronized, not the uneven rumble of civilian traffic, a deeper sound, military. Through the windows, sunlight gleamed off black Chevrolet Tahoes pulling into formation. Doors opened. Men stepped out in dress uniforms. Their posture was unmistakable, disciplined, exact, purposeful. Every head in the diner turned. And Lisa, she didn't move, didn't look. Only her pulse shifted, quickening against Gredell's grip. Zephr let go of her wrist, suddenly uncertain. His arrogance faltered as recognition dawned on what kind of vehicles had just arrived. Kai's was already standing at something close to attention, though he couldn't have said why. Then the door opened. General Magnus Albani, 3 silver stars on his shoulder, 56 years of command carved into his posture. His shoes clicked against the linoleum as he entered. His gaze swept the diner once, sharp and cutting, and then it softened. He had found her. "Sergeant Vaspera," he said, his voice carrying both weight and warmth. "It's been too long." The effect was electric. Lisa straightened instantly. Her spine found its old precision. Her hands folded neatly at her sides. "General Albani," she said softly. A small smile touched her lips, breaking through the mask she had worn for over a year. "An unexpected honor, sir." The diner was frozen in disbelief. Zephyr's mouth hung open. Kai's looked pale. None of this made sense. The general had just addressed the diner's quiet waitress like a soldier, like an equal, no, like someone rare. Albani stepped closer to the counter. His eyes flicked toward her sleeve. "May I?" Lisa rolled the fabric higher, revealing the raven fully. No shame, no explanation, just the mark. And slowly, deliberately, the general rolled up his own sleeve. The gasps were audible. The same raven, the same ink. His was fresher, newer, a deliberate bond, not imitation. In that moment, the world tilted. Lisa felt the weight of years press against her chest, the faces of her team, the sound of a hostage crying in the dark, the 6 hours of holding ground when everyone else had fallen. She had not wanted this day to come, not here, not now, but fate was never polite. The diner had become a stage, and every pair of eyes was locked on her. Albani's voice was steady, but cold now, turned toward the operators. "Gentlemen, you've been questioning this woman's service record." Neither answered. Zephr swallowed hard. Kai stared at the counter. "Then allow me to enlighten you." And just like that, the walls Lisa had built around herself trembled. Because the general was about to speak aloud what she had kept buried. What she had tried so hard to leave behind. What secret was about to be revealed in front of everyone. The diner was so quiet that even the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner seemed loud. General Albani stood tall, his stars gleaming under the fluorescent light, his eyes locked on the 2 men who moments ago had mocked Lisa as a fraud. His tone carried no anger, only the weight of absolute authority. "Sergeant Lisandre Vaspera," he began, and the name itself cut through the room like a blade. "Army Intelligence Task Force Echo, retired." Zephr Gredell blinked rapidly, his usual swagger erased. Kai's Fenbomb, already pale, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, fighting the instinct to salute. Neither spoke. Task Force Echo, the general continued, was a classified direct-action unit operating in Afghanistan and Syria from 2012 to 2018. 7 members in total. Their mission parameters remained sealed at the highest levels. Their insignia, the Raven, was never seen in public, never acknowledged outside of need to know. He turned slowly, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "And you just accused one of them of stolen valor." The words were ice. Lisa stood motionless, her sleeve still rolled up, the tattoo exposed like a scar. The room swirled with whispers, but she heard none of them. Her heart was pounding, though her face remained still. For over a year she had hidden in plain sight. Now, in a matter of seconds, the veil had been ripped away. She didn't want this. She had left that life behind for a reason. But Albani was not done. In 2016, his voice softened, shifting from reprimand to something heavier. Her team was compromised during a hostage rescue outside Aleppo. The situation was catastrophic. Civilians trapped, coalition personnel wounded, enemy reinforcements closing in. Most would have called it hopeless. Lisa closed her eyes just for a second. She could still hear the gunfire, the crack of RPGs, the screaming, the smell of diesel and smoke in her lungs. She had never told anyone, not the other diner staff, not Dorothy, not even herself in the mirror. But here it was again, spoken aloud. Sergeant Vaspera, Albani continued, single-handedly held off hostile forces for 6 hours. 6 hours of sustained fire while coordinating evacuation. She extracted 18 souls that day. 18, including my own. A murmur rippled through the diner. The number hit like thunder, 18 people, saved by one. Zephr Gredell swallowed, his bravado shattered. He looked at Lisa with something that resembled fear, but it was more than that, it was recognition. Albani's eyes swept the room again, landing back on her. "The Raven," he said softly, glancing at his own ink. "It represents the silent watch, the guardian in darkness. There are 7 in the world who bear it, 4 still alive. This woman is one of them." For the first time, Lisa's composure cracked. Not outwardly, not visibly, but inside her chest ached with the ghosts of the other 3 who weren't alive anymore. Names etched into her memory, faces she couldn't forget. She shifted slightly, resting her hand on the counter as if steadying herself. Albani let the silence hang before delivering the final blow. "And you had the audacity to accuse her of dishonor." Zephyr's lips parted, but no words came. Kai's lowered his gaze entirely, shame radiating off him. The general didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "My office, 600, both of you, be prepared to explain how you could forget that true warriors often walk among us unrecognized." Dorothy, behind the register, finally let go of the phone she'd been ready to dial. Truckers stared into their mugs. Families whispered to one another, unsure if they should leave or stay to witness history. And Lisa, she simply breathed. Finally she spoke, her voice low but steady. "General, if I may." He gave a slight nod. She turned to the 2 operators, not with bitterness, not with triumph, but with something gentler. "The service isn't about proving yourself to others. It's about being worthy of the trust placed in you. Real operators don't need recognition. They just do the job." Her words sank deeper than any scolding. They weren't aimed only at Zephyr and Kai's. They carried through the whole room, through anyone who had ever misunderstood what true service meant. Then she lowered her sleeve, smoothed the fabric, and picked up a cloth to wipe the counter, returning to her work as though nothing had changed. But everything had. Albani's expression softened. He pulled a bill from his wallet and set it on the counter. "Coffee on me today, Sergeant. Thank you for your continued service to this community." He left without ceremony, his men following. The Tahoes rumbled to life outside, fading into the distance until only silence remained. The diner's hum resumed slowly. Conversation started again, though softer, more respectful. Life went on, but it would not be the same. Zephyr and Kai sat frozen. Neither touched their coffee. Neither dared to look at Lisa again. Their world had shifted in ways they could not yet comprehend. Lisa, however, simply kept moving, refilled Dorothy's mug, collected empty plates, wiped crumbs from the counter. But her mind was elsewhere. It drifted back to Aleppo, to the night the Raven truly earned its wings. The compound had been supposed to be a quick snatch and grab. Intel had pointed to a small cell holding local hostages, maybe 2 or 3. The team had trained together so many times that movements were muscle memory. Silent entry, secure the perimeter, extract. But the intel had been wrong, terribly wrong. There weren't 3 hostages, there were 12, civilians, broken, terrified, some too weak to move quickly, and the enemy wasn't a handful, it was a battalion, reinforcements already converging as the first shots rang out. She remembered the chaos, the radio crackling as voices barked orders, drowned in gunfire, the sting of smoke in her throat. She remembered how the walls shook when an RPG hit the outer wall. And she remembered the decision. She had seen the fear in her commander's eyes, the realization that extraction might not be possible, the moment when he looked at her, not with words, but with that silent transfer of trust that only exists in the darkest hours. Go, she had told him, take them, I'll cover. He had tried to refuse, but she had already set her jaw, already moved to the breach, rifle ready. The next 6 hours blurred into one long scream of sound and light. She remembered crouching low, sighting targets, pulling the trigger until her shoulder ached. She remembered dragging a wounded civilian into cover between volleys. She remembered the night sky lit by tracer fire. But most of all, she remembered the silence that came afterward, the eerie calm when it was over, the way the compound smelled of smoke and dust and blood, the way the raven tattoo burned against her skin as though marking her forever. 18 lives saved. But 3 of her team didn't come back. And that was the truth she carried, the price etched into her very being. Lisa blinked and she was back in the diner, cloth in hand, counter shining. Dorothy was talking softly to a customer. The operators were still silent, their arrogance hollow now. The world had moved forward, but her past had not. She carried it like a shadow, and now the shadow had stepped into the light. The raven never flew for glory. It flew for the ones who couldn't. Why hadn't she left when she had the chance? The Silver Creek diner buzzed faintly again, but it was the kind of buzz that came after lightning, a fragile sound, tinged with unease. Lisa kept moving behind the counter, her hands steady, her motions practiced. But inside, her thoughts rattled like loose shell casings. The general's voice still lingered in her ears. Sergeant Vaspera, 18 lives, Task Force Echo. Words she had tried to bury, dragged into the light in front of strangers who had known her only as Lisa. She could feel their eyes still sneaking glances. The trucker at the corner booth, staring into his coffee, wondering what kind of battles she had fought. The young mother, whispering to her husband about the tattoo, about the general's salute. Even Dorothy, usually steady as a lighthouse, kept stealing looks over her shoulder, her face a mixture of pride and sorrow. But the ones who mattered most were still at the counter. Zephr Gredell hadn't touched his coffee. He sat rigid, jaw clenched, as if replaying every arrogant word he'd spat minutes earlier. His fingers drummed against the ceramic cup, then stopped, then started again, a restless rhythm that betrayed unease. Kai's Fenbomb sat with his shoulders heavy, eyes down, his silence almost penitential. But every so often he looked at her sleeve, at the raven, not with disbelief anymore, but with something closer to awe. Lisa noticed all of it. She noticed everything. Years of training hadn't left her, no matter how many months she'd spent serving pie and pouring refills. She read their posture, their micro-expressions, their tension. She could almost hear the thoughts rattling in their skulls. And yet she said nothing. She wanted the quiet back, the anonymity. She wanted to be the invisible woman again, the one who could move through her days without anyone knowing the weight she carried. But the raven had flown, and the world had seen it. She excused herself briefly, slipping into the narrow hallway by the restrooms. Her back pressed against the cool plaster wall. She shut her eyes and inhaled deeply. Why now, why here? Albani had always respected her silence. He had let her vanish when she walked away from the army. He had signed the papers without question, given her that gift of release. He had told her, in his clipped, quiet way, that he would never speak of Task Force Echo outside of a closed room. So why had he walked into her diner today? with 3 black Tahoes and a uniform polished to perfection, and spoken her name aloud. A flicker of memory burned. "You've done enough, Sergeant. If you want out, you've earned it." His voice, years ago in that sterile office. She had nodded, unable to speak, her throat raw from swallowing too many ghosts. And she had left. But ghosts don't care about discharge papers. She pressed her palms into her eyes, trying to push away the faces. One by one they came anyway. Marlowe, who could make the whole squad laugh even on the worst nights. Kincaid, whose steady aim had saved her life more than once. Piers, quiet as a shadow, who had died in silence on the Aleppo perimeter while she fought to hold the line. 3 gone, 4 left. And now one of those 4 was standing in her diner, rolling up his sleeve, showing the Raven to the world. Her throat ached. She straightened and splashed her face with cold water from the sink, staring at herself in the mirror. Auburn hair pulled back, eyes that had seen too much. The black polo shirt that marked her as Lisa, diner staff, not Sergeant Vaspera. She clung to that uniform more tightly than any other she had ever worn. But it wasn't armor anymore. When she stepped back into the diner, the room shifted again. Whispers hushed. Eyes darted away. The Raven, invisible under her sleeve once more, was still there in every gaze. Dorothy gave her a small nod, motherly but unsure. Zephyr cleared his throat. For the first time since his humiliation, he tried to speak. "Sergeant," the word came awkwardly, reluctant but laced with respect. Lisa cut him off softly. "Don't." Her tone wasn't sharp. It wasn't angry, but it silenced him better than any shout could. She poured a fresh pot of coffee, her movements quiet. Around her, the diner carried on, but tension lingered like the aftertaste of strong whiskey. Her mind was no longer here. It was half a world away. Afghanistan, 2013. The sandstorm had rolled in without warning. Grit stung her face, filled her ears, turned every shadow into a shifting ghost. Her team was on recon, stretched thin, visibility near zero. Communication sputtered. She remembered crouching low against a crumbling wall, rifle steady, scanning through dust that made the world unreal. She remembered the sharp crack of gunfire from nowhere, the way her heart had surged not with fear, but with clarity. Every mission had been like that. The world narrowing to the sound of breath, the pressure of the trigger, the knowledge that lives hung in the space between seconds. But what she remembered most wasn't the firefight itself. It was afterward, sitting in the temporary outpost, sand still clinging to her skin, when Marlowe had tossed her a canteen with a grin. "You're too calm in the storm, Vaspera," he'd said. "One of these days, you'll walk straight through hell and not even break a sweat." She had smiled then, just a little. She hadn't known how true his words would become. Back in the diner, her smile was long gone. She poured coffee into a customer's mug and listened faintly to the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. She wanted to disappear into routine, but her heart was restless. She could feel Zephyr's eyes still on her. Not mocking now, but searching, trying to understand. She knew his type, men who believed war was glory until they saw the price. He was still young enough to think respect was owed only to the loudest. She wondered if he would ever learn otherwise. Kai's shifted, finally daring to speak. His voice was low, tentative. "Ma'am, did you really?" he faltered, then stopped. Lisa didn't answer. Some truths didn't need to be spoken. Dorothy clattered plates at the sink, covering the silence. And then, like a blade slipping under armor, the thought struck Lisa again. She wasn't safe anymore. She had built this quiet life on one fragile foundation, anonymity. Now, with one moment, it was gone. The general hadn't just recognized her. He had named her, out loud, in front of witnesses. Task Force Echo was supposed to remain a rumor, a shadow. Now, in a small Kentucky diner, it had become a story whispered over coffee. She could almost hear it spreading. The Raven had been seen. That night when the diner closed and the neon lights flickered off, Lisa walked home alone. The autumn air bit at her cheeks. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a car, seemed sharper. She moved with the old awareness she thought she had left behind, checking shadows, scanning rooftops, nodding exits. It unsettled her, because part of her realized she wasn't just reacting out of fear. She was falling back into it too easily. The soldier was still under the surface, waiting, watching. She had wanted that part of herself buried, but it had been only sleeping. And now it was awake. At her small apartment, she locked the door and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. Her hands trembled faintly in her lap. 18 lives saved, 3 lost. Her raven tattoo burned beneath her skin like fire. She pressed her palm against it, eyes closed. Silent, watching, protecting. But from what? The general's words echoed again. My office, 600, both of you. She wasn't summoned, but she felt it, like a ripple pulling her back toward a current she had left long ago. She whispered to the empty room, voice low. I didn't want to go back. But sometimes the past doesn't ask permission. Why had he looked at her that way? Lisa couldn't shake the image of the general's eyes as he'd rolled up his sleeve, revealing the same raven inked into his flesh. There had been pride there, yes, but also something else. A weight, a silent message only she could read. It wasn't just recognition, it was a summons. Her apartment was dark, the only light the dull glow of a street lamp filtering through the blinds. She hadn't bothered with dinner, only sat in the worn chair by the window, her knees pulled up, her eyes scanning the shadows outside as if expecting something to move. She hated this. For 14 months she had built a rhythm. Simple, predictable, a shift at the diner, a walk home, the occasional grocery trip. No one knew her, not really. She was invisible, and invisibility was a gift. But now her anonymity was shattered, and Albani had been the one to do it. Why here, why now? The general had promised her once that the raven could sleep, that she had done her part, that she could walk away. He had looked her in the eye and told her she had earned the right to silence. So why had he broken it? Her mind turned restlessly, circling the question like a predator that wouldn't let go. Because maybe he hadn't come just to humiliate 2 arrogant operators. Maybe he had come for her. The next morning the diner bustled with its usual crowd, but the air was different. People looked at her differently. Not cruelly, not mocking, but with curiosity, with caution. Morning, Lisa, Dorothy said softly, placing a tray of silverware on the counter. Her tone was almost too gentle, like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. Morning, Lisa forced a small smile. She poured coffee. She cleared plates. She worked as she always did, every motion sharp, efficient. But whispers threaded through the air, carried on the steam of frying bacon and the hiss of the grill. That's her, isn't it? Someone murmured. The one, the general. Task Force something echo, real hush-hush stuff. Lisa ignored them, or tried to, but each word was a pebble striking the armor she'd forged. When she refilled Zephyr's mug, yes, he had come back. He flinched slightly as though her presence itself carried weight. He muttered a thank you, not meeting her eyes. Kai sat beside him, posture straight, hands folded like a schoolboy in church. Neither dared to test her anymore, but their presence wasn't comforting. If anything, it unsettled her more. Because why were they here? Why had they returned when shame should have kept them far away? She knew the answer before she admitted it. Curiosity, and maybe something more. Maybe Albani had spoken to them after leaving yesterday. Maybe orders were already shifting behind closed doors. The raven never appeared without purpose. That night she dreamed. The sound came first, rotors chopping the sky, dust whipping across the ground. Then the blast. The world erupted in fire and stone. She hit the dirt hard, ears ringing, lungs burning. Her team's voices filled her headset, shouts, screams, fragments of orders. She crawled forward, rifle clutched to her chest, eyes stinging from smoke. Shadows moved in the chaos, indistinct, endless. She fired again. The rifle kicked against her shoulder until it was part of her body. Her hand was slick with blood, she didn't know whose. A voice cut through, clear, commanding. Albani's still a colonel then. Hold the line, Vaspera, hold it. She had held it. For 6 endless hours she had been the line, until the sky grew pale and the last hostage was safe. She woke with a start, sweat cold on her skin. Her breath came shallow. She pressed her palm against the tattoo on her forearm. The raven, silent, watching, protecting. Always protecting. She whispered to herself, I'm not going back. But the words felt fragile. 2 days later, the answer arrived. It came not in words but in presence. She was wiping down the counter near closing when the bell over the door chimed. The air shifted instantly. General Albani stood in the doorway, not in uniform this time but in civilian clothes, dark jacket, pressed trousers, polished shoes. He carried no entourage, no flashing symbols of rank, but his presence filled the room all the same. The few remaining customers stiffened. Dorothy froze mid-step, her hands clutching a stack of plates. Lisa, he said quietly, not Sergeant this time, just Lisa. Her eyes met his, calm on the surface, turbulent beneath. She didn't speak, just nodded toward a booth. He sat, she poured him coffee without asking. Black, always black. For a long moment they didn't speak. The diner hummed softly, the neon sign buzzing outside. Finally, Albani said, I shouldn't have done it that way. Her hand paused, cloth mid-wipe. I shouldn't have named you in front of them, he continued. His voice was low, deliberate. But I had to make a point, and I had to remind them, remind myself. She set the cloth down and sat across from him. Why? Albani leaned forward, his eyes sharper now, the way they had always been when strategy lived behind them. Because the world isn't what it was when you left, Lisa. Things are moving. Quiet things, dangerous things, and the raven may be called to fly again. Her chest tightened, she shook her head. I'm out, I've been out. His gaze softened, but only slightly. You can take the soldier out of the fight, but can you take the fight out of the soldier? She flinched inwardly, because he wasn't wrong. She had lived quietly for 14 months, but the instincts had never left. The awareness, the readiness. Even now, sitting in a diner booth, she catalogued every sound, every face, every possible threat. I'm not asking you to come back, he said carefully. Not yet. I just need you to know eyes are turning our way again. And when they do, they won't care that you're serving coffee. They'll only care about the raven. She swallowed hard. The general finished his coffee, set the cup down, and rose. His parting words were softer, almost fatherly. Sometimes we don't get to choose when the past calls us. Sometimes it just does. He left without ceremony, his footsteps fading into the night. Lisa sat in silence, the booth across from her still warm from his presence. She wanted to scream, to break, to run. But instead, she picked up the empty cup and washed it. Her hands moved, steady as ever, but inside she trembled. Because she knew the truth. The raven was stirring. And this time, it might not let her sleep again. Why were the same 2 men still watching her? It had been nearly a week since the general's second visit, but peace had not returned to the Silver Creek diner. Lisa felt it in every shift. Every morning she laced her shoes and tied back her auburn hair. The quiet anonymity she had built had been broken. Not loudly, not with headlines, but with whispers. Did you hear about the waitress? They say she saved 18 lives in Aleppo. No, she's not just a waitress. She was one of them, task force something. The words traveled like smoke, subtle, but they lingered everywhere. And always the operators came back. Zephr Gredell sat at the counter most mornings now, no longer mocking but still restless, still trying to place her in his world. His arrogance had been bruised, but arrogance doesn't die easily. It bends, reshapes itself. His eyes followed her every move, searching, questioning. Kai's Fenbomb was different, quiet, watchful. Sometimes he tried to speak small words of thanks or awkward questions, but she deflected them. She didn't want their curiosity. She didn't want their respect. She wanted silence. But silence was gone. That night, Lisa walked home slower than usual. The autumn air carried a sharp bite, leaves skittering across the pavement like whispers she couldn't catch. She kept her hood up, her pace even, but her senses prickled. She felt watched. It wasn't paranoia. She had lived too long with real enemies to mistake it. Somewhere in the shadows, someone's eyes tracked her steps. She stopped under a streetlight, letting the glow spill over her shoulders. Listened. Nothing but the distant hum of a highway. She turned her head slightly, catching the faintest movement, too quick, too cautious. A shadow slipping behind a tree. Her jaw tightened. Whoever it was, they were good, but not good enough to fool her. Lisa resumed walking but changed her rhythm, pausing at corners, doubling back once, cutting through an alley she rarely used. By the time she reached her apartment, she was certain. She had a tail. And that could mean only one thing. Albani's words had been more than a warning. The raven wasn't just stirring, it was being hunted. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at her small kitchen table, a knife laid across the wood, the blinds shut tight. The city outside was ordinary, but inside her chest the old drumbeat had returned. She hadn't wanted this life again, but here it was, knocking at her door. When the knock finally came, it was almost a relief. 3 taps, sharp, deliberate. Her muscles tensed. She stood, knife still in her hand, and approached the door silently. "Lisa." The voice on the other side made her pause. "Kai's." She opened the door cautiously, knife still hidden at her side. He stood in the hallway, no arrogance in his posture, no swagger, just seriousness. Behind him, Zephr lingered, less certain, shifting his weight. "We need to talk," Kai said. Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Zephr spoke for the first time, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "Because the general's not telling us everything, and we think you already know." Her stomach sank. She stepped aside reluctantly, letting them in. The apartment was bare, almost Spartan. A table, 2 chairs, a couch that had seen better years. Nothing on the walls. No photos, no trophies, no past. Kai's looked around respectfully, sitting only when she gestured. Zephr remained standing, restless. "What do you want?" Lisa asked, crossing her arms. "The truth," Zephr said flatly. "Albani humiliated us, fine, we deserved it. But then he calls us into his office, doesn't say a damn word about punishment. No lecture, no paperwork, just tells us to watch and learn. Watch you." Lisa said nothing. "He's circling something," Kai's added carefully. "Something bigger, and whatever it is, it involves you." Her silence was its own answer. Zephyr's eyes narrowed. "So it's true, you're not just a relic, you're active, you're part of something now." Lisa's voice was calm, but there was steel under it. "I'm not active, I walked away, I serve coffee, that's all." Kai's leaned forward, his tone almost pleading. "Then why is someone following you?" The words froze the room. Her pulse spiked. "You saw them." Kai's nodded. "Last night, you weren't imagining it." Lisa's chest tightened. The confirmation landed like a hammer. Someone was watching. Someone outside Albani's control. She moved to the window, peering through the blinds into the night. The street below was quiet, ordinary, but she knew now that it was. Zephyr's voice broke the silence. "Who are they?" "I don't know," she turned, meeting their eyes. "And I don't care, because I'm not going back." Zephyr's jaw clenched. He wanted to argue. Kai stayed quiet, studying her, as if trying to see the war still inside her. Finally she said, "Leave, both of you. Whatever Albani is pulling, I'm not part of it, not anymore." They hesitated, but her tone left no room for debate. When the door closed behind them, Lisa stood alone in the silence, knife still in her hand. the weight of the raven burning under her skin. Hours later, she dreamed again. The compound was burning. Smoke poured into the sky. Civilians cried out, stumbling toward her as she shouted directions. Her rifle barked, each shot echoing like thunder. Her body screamed with exhaustion, but she did not stop. The line could not break. She saw Piers fall, silent, his blood soaking the dirt. She dragged another hostage toward the convoy, then turned back, covering the retreat with fire that seemed endless. The raven in her veins screamed, demanded, commanded, protect, always protect. Even if it killed her. She woke with a cry lodged in her throat, tears stinging her eyes. Her hand pressed against her tattoo. She whispered into the darkness, "Not again." But the night gave no answer. The following day, Albani appeared again, not in the diner this time, on the street. Lisa spotted him across from the market as she left with a small bag of groceries. No entourage, no uniform, just a man waiting. She considered walking past, pretending not to see him, but he stepped forward, his eyes locking on hers. "Lisa." She stopped. The world around them carried on, cars passing, people chatting, but the space between them was sharp, heavy. "You brought them to me," she said quietly. Albani shook his head. "No, they came on their own." "Then why are others watching me?" His expression hardened. "Because the raven still means something. To some it means protection, to others it means threat, and threats attract hunters." Her breath caught. "I told you I wasn't asking you to come back," Albani continued. "But I need you to understand, you can't hide anymore, not from this. The moment your sleeve rolled up, the moment the ink was seen, the silence ended." She hated that he was right. Albani's voice softened. "You saved lives once, you may need to again." Lisa closed her eyes briefly, the weight of ghosts pressing down. She didn't answer. She just walked away, her footsteps sharp against the pavement, her heart heavier than it had been in years. That night she sat at her table again, the knife in her hand, staring at the raven tattoo. She whispered, voice breaking, "I just wanted to disappear." But deep inside she knew the truth. The raven was already flying again. And the question was no longer whether she would follow. It was whether she could stop it. Who was the man waiting outside her door? Lisa noticed him as soon as she turned the corner onto her street. Middle-aged, civilian clothes too ordinary, a baseball cap pulled low, but his stance gave him away. Feet planted, shoulders squared, eyes never drifting from her apartment building. A tale, but not careless this time. Her pulse quickened, though her pace stayed even. She walked past, keys already in her hand, pretending not to notice. Her instincts screamed. He wasn't alone. There were always at least two. The raven stirred in her chest, whispering the old rhythm, assess, predict, act. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and shut it behind her. The lock clicked. She leaned back against the wood, groceries sliding from her hand onto the floor. For a long moment, she just listened. Silence outside, too silent. Lisa's jaw tightened. She couldn't live like this, not hiding, not waiting for shadows to close in. She went to the bedroom closet. From the back, under old clothes folded neatly to hide it, she pulled a small black case. She hadn't touched it in 14 months. Her hand shook as she set it on the bed. When she opened it, the smell of oil and metal hit her like a memory. Inside lay her sidearm, holstered, disassembled parts wrapped in cloth, a few magazines sealed in plastic. She stared at it for a long moment. She didn't want this. She had promised herself she would never touch it again. But promises don't stop threats. With practiced precision, she assembled the weapon. Her fingers moved like they remembered without thought. Slide, barrel, magazine. The old rhythm was still there, waiting for her. When she was done, she sat on the edge of the bed, weapon resting on her knees. She whispered to the empty room, "I'm not ready." But maybe readiness didn't matter anymore. The next evening, the hunters showed themselves. It was after closing, the diner dark except for the neon sign buzzing outside. Lisa had stayed late, cleaning counters, stacking chairs, sweeping the floor. Dorothy had gone home hours earlier. She was alone. Or so she thought. The bell above the door chimed. Her hand froze on the broom. She hadn't unlocked the door. Two men entered, one tall and thin, the other broader with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Civilians by clothing, soldiers by bearing. The scarred one smiled faintly. Evening. Lisa said nothing. Her hand gripped the broom tighter. "You don't know us," the thin one said, "but we know you." The raven on her arm seemed to burn. Scarface stepped closer. "We've been looking for you, Sergeant. The raven doesn't get to hide forever." Her heart pounded, but her face stayed calm. "You've got the wrong person." They laughed softly. "No," Scarface said, "we don't." The thin one tilted his head. "We're not here to hurt you, not unless you make it necessary. We just need information, access. You still have contacts, doors that open when you knock. We need those doors." Lisa's eyes narrowed. This wasn't about her. It was about what she carried, the weight of Echo's secrets. "I'm out," she said evenly. "I don't have anything you want." Scarface's smile widened. "Funny, that's not what our intel says." Lisa's hand twitched, but she forced herself still. A broom wasn't much, but a broom handle could break bone if you knew how. The thin one leaned on the counter casually, but his eyes were sharp. "You know what's coming, don't you? Albani knows. That's why he showed his ink. That's why he went public. He's preparing the board. And you're still a piece, even if you don't want to be." Her blood ran cold. They knew about Albani, about the raven, too much. Scarface took another step. "So you can help us willingly or not." Lisa didn't move. Not yet, but the soldier inside her was awake now fully. Her voice was low, dangerous. "Leave now." The thin one smirked. "Or what? You'll sweep us out the door." Scarface's eyes glinted. "Or maybe she's still what they say she is." That was the mistake. The moment they crossed the invisible line, the soldier acted. Lisa swung the broom handle hard, striking Scarface's wrist with a crack. He cursed, stumbling back. She pivoted, jabbing the handle into the thin one's gut, knocking the air from his lungs. The raven had taken flight. Scarface lunged, grabbing at her arm, but she twisted, slamming his head into the counter edge. He went down with a grunt. The thin one staggered, gasping, reaching for something under his jacket. Her hand found the sidearm holstered under her apron. She hadn't planned to carry it to work, but instinct had told her otherwise. She drew, aimed steady. "Don't." The word cracked through the diner. The thin man froze, hand halfway to his weapon. His eyes met hers, wide, seeing not a waitress but the ghost of Task Force Echo, alive and deadly in a small Kentucky diner. Lisa's breath was steady, but her chest burned. She hadn't wanted this. She had promised herself she was done. But here she was again, weapon in hand, the raven flying whether she willed it or not. Scarface groaned on the floor. The thin one slowly raised his hands. "Okay," he said carefully. "Message received." Lisa's voice was ice. "If you come near me again, you won't walk away." They backed toward the door, dragging Scarface upright. The bell chimed as they left. And then silence. Lisa lowered the weapon slowly, her hands trembling. She sank into a chair, heart hammering against her ribs. She whispered into the empty diner, "Not again. I can't do this again." But deep down she knew. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Later that night she sat in her apartment, the weapon on the table in front of her. The memory of the men's words replayed endlessly. "You know what's coming. Albani knows. The raven is still a piece." Her mind spiraled. If Albani had revealed her, it wasn't just to defend her honor. He had painted a target on her. And now the hunters had found her. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't admitted to herself. Fear. Not for herself, She had faced death too many times to fear it, but for what her existence might unleash. If the raven was being hunted, then everything it represented was in danger. The lives it had protected, the secrets it had carried, the people who still bore its mark. The four who remained. She whispered their names to the dark, the way one whispers prayers. Marlowe, Kincaid, Albani, herself. 4 ravens left, 4 targets. Her hand clenched into a fist. The soldier inside her whispered, "Protect." But the woman she wanted to be whispered back, "No more." And between the two voices, she sat in silence, staring at the weapon that had never truly left her. The next morning she went to the diner as if nothing had happened. Customers came and went. Coffee poured, plates clattered, life went on. But Lisa's eyes were sharper now. Every face was assessed, every movement catalogued. She couldn't switch it off. When Zephr and Kais walked in, she didn't need to ask why. They had heard, or maybe they had seen. Zephr tried to act casual, but there was something different in his gaze now. Not arrogance, not even respect, something closer to allegiance. Kais said nothing, but the way he watched her told her enough. They knew the raven was flying again. And so did she. Why did the general look at her with regret this time? Lisa had been summoned, not with orders, not with threats, just a quiet note slipped under the diner door the next morning. A folded piece of paper with 4 words scrawled in Albani's sharp hand, "We need to talk." She should have burned it, she should have ignored it. But she didn't. Instead, she found herself hours later walking through the outskirts of Fort Campbell, down a road she hadn't walked in over a year, toward a place she had once sworn she would never return to. Her stomach knotted with every step. The meeting spot was simple, an old training hangar, its metal frame rusted, its windows clouded with dust. Inside, the echo of her footsteps carried through the hollow space, and there he was, waiting in the center. Albani, civilian clothes again, but nothing could strip the soldier from him. His back straight, his presence commanding. But when he turned to face her, his eyes held something softer than command, something heavier. "Lisa," he greeted quietly. She didn't sit, she didn't even step closer. She stood by the door, arms crossed, every muscle taut. "Why did you send them after me?" He frowned. "I didn't." "Then why are men watching me? Why did they come into the diner? They knew about the raven, they knew about you." Albani's silence stretched long, too long. Finally he said, "Because someone's leaking, someone who wants the raven exposed." Her jaw tightened. "And you think it's me?" "No," his tone was sharp, decisive. "Never you." "Then who?" Albani looked away briefly, the lines in his face deepening. "I don't know, but I know this. The raven was never just a mark, it was a seal, a promise. As long as its bearers lived quietly, the unit's secrets stayed buried. But now someone wants those secrets dragged into daylight, and they'll come for all of you to get them." Her breath caught. "All 4. He nodded grimly. "You, me, Kincaid, Marlowe." Her chest ached at the sound of those names. Old ghosts, old brothers. They had survived together, but barely. She had promised herself she'd never be drawn back into their orbit, and now fate was pulling them all. Albani stepped closer. "Lisa, I showed the ink that day not to expose you, to protect you, because I needed them to know who you are. So when the storm hits, you aren't standing alone." Her voice trembled despite her control. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," he said softly, "but sometimes the world doesn't ask, sometimes it just calls." Her fists clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to demand why he couldn't leave her to her silence, to her exile. But another part of her, the part that had taken up the rifle in Aleppo, the part that had stood alone against impossible odds, knew he was right. "Who were they?" she asked instead. "The men who came into the diner." Albani's jaw hardened. "Contractors, former intelligence assets gone rogue. They've been circling the edges for months. Not quite mercenaries, not quite soldiers. They're looking for leverage, and the raven is leverage. Her stomach twisted. Albani's eyes sharpened. You fought them off. Her silence was enough of an answer. He exhaled slowly. They'll come back stronger, and not just for you. Lisa finally stepped closer, her voice low but steady. So what do you want from me, General? Say it plain. Albani met her gaze, no hesitation. I want you to stand with us again, one last time. Her heart stopped. The words were both a knife and a lifeline. She turned away, packing her chest tight. No, I can't. I left for a reason. I can't go back. If I go back, I won't come out again. He let the silence hang, then said softly, maybe that's what the raven was always meant to be. Silent, unseen, protecting until it burns itself out. She froze, her breath ragged. And in that moment, she hated him. Hated him for knowing exactly how to pierce through the walls she had built. Later that night, she returned to her apartment hollow, shaken. She sat at her table in the dark, the weapon in front of her again. Her hands traced the grooves, the weight familiar. She remembered the day she left, the sterile office, the discharge papers, the way she had signed her name and felt nothing, no relief, no grief, just emptiness. Albani had said she earned it. She had believed him. But now that emptiness was filling again, with dread, with guilt, with inevitability. The raven had never asked her if she wanted it. It had been branded into her soul the day Aleppo burned, and it would never let her go. The next morning, the operators came back. Zephr sat at the counter, not cocky anymore. He didn't even smirk. He looked tired, humbled. Kais followed, his expression unreadable. They ordered nothing, just sat, watching, waiting. Finally, Zephr spoke. They came for you, didn't they? Lisa's eyes flicked up cold. You don't know what you're asking. Maybe not, he admitted. But I know what I saw. You handled them like no one else could. And if they're coming for you, then they're coming for all of us. We can't ignore it. Kais leaned forward, his voice quiet but clear. You think you're alone in this, but you're not anymore. For a long moment, she said nothing. Just poured coffee into their empty cups, the steam rising between them like smoke from a battlefield. Inside, though, she felt something shift. Because part of her, despite the fear, despite the resistance, didn't want to be alone anymore. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. That evening, she walked home under a sky streaked with crimson clouds. Every step felt heavier. She whispered into the air, barely audible, what if I can't stop it this time? But no answer came. Only the silent flutter of the raven's wings inside her chest, relentless, inevitable. What would she choose when the moment came? Lisa had avoided the question for weeks, pretending she could outrun it. Pretending that the raven tattoo was nothing more than ink on skin, that her past had stayed buried. But deep down, she had always known this day would come. It came not with warning, but with fire. The diner was closing late one night, the neon sign buzzing faintly outside, when the world shattered. The first explosion tore through the silence like thunder, rattling the windows, knocking mugs from shelves. Lisa dropped behind the counter instinctively, the soldier already awake inside her. The blast came from the street, something planted in a car, crude but powerful. She rose carefully, eyes scanning, and then she saw them. The hunters. 5 this time, heavily built, masked, rifles slung across their chests, no pretending to be civilians anymore, no polite offers. They had come for her openly, violently. The first shot cracked through the glass, scattering shards across the linoleum. Lisa moved without thinking. She grabbed Dorothy, still wiping down a table, frozen in shock, and dragged her to the kitchen, shoving her behind the heavy freezer door. Stay down, don't move. Her voice was calm, clipped, but her heart was pounding like a war drum. She grabbed the pistol from under the counter. Her hands were steady, too steady. The raven had taken full control now. The front door burst open. Shadows spilled inside. Lisa fired first, 2 shots precise. One man dropped with a scream, another staggered back, wounded. The others fanned out, shouting to each other, professional, disciplined. These weren't thugs, these were trained. But so was she. She moved low, slipping behind booths, her breath measured. Every motion was instinct, carved into her bones from years of combat. One hunter crept too close to the counter. She rose suddenly, slammed the butt of her pistol into his jaw and brought him down. Another raised his rifle. She fired once, clean, and he fell. But numbers had weight. They pressed in, hurting her, forcing her deeper into the diner. Her lungs burned, her arms ached. She hadn't fought like this in years, but she would not break. Not while the Raven still flew. Outside, headlights cut through the smoke, engines roared. And then shouts, orders barked. The cavalry had arrived. Zephr and Kais were first through the back door, weapons drawn, faces pale but determined. They had come anyway, despite everything. Behind them, more boots pounded, the general's men moving with precision. Gunfire erupted, deafening, as the two forces clashed in the cramped space of the diner. Lisa didn't hesitate. She fought alongside them, covering angles, clearing threats, her movements seamless with theirs despite the years apart. For a brief moment, it was as if she had never left. A hunter lunged toward Zephr. Lisa dropped him with a single shot. Another swung behind Kais. She shoved him clear and took the blow herself, staggering but not falling. The fight burned quick and brutal, and then, suddenly, it was over. Bodies lay sprawled across the linoleum. Smoke hung in the air. The neon sign buzzed faintly above shattered glass. Lisa stood in the wreckage, chest heaving, pistol still raised. Albani entered then, his presence cutting through the aftermath like a blade. His eyes swept the scene once, then landed on her. "You see now," he said softly. Her hand trembled. She lowered the pistol slowly, her arm heavy as if weighed down by every ghost she had ever carried. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "I know. They'll keep coming." "Yes." Her throat tightened. "Then it never ends." Albani stepped closer, his voice quiet but resolute. "Maybe not, but the Raven was never about ending. It was about standing, about protecting, no matter the cost." She closed her eyes, and for a moment she was back in Aleppo. Smoke, screams, 18 lives lifted from the jaws of death, 3 brothers lost forever, the tattoo burning on her arm, branding her not with pride but with duty. She opened her eyes again, tears she refused to shed blurring the wreckage. "I can't go back," she said. Albani shook his head. "No, you never left." The words cut deep, because she knew they were true. Later, when the bodies were cleared and the diner stood hollow in silence, Lisa sat alone in the corner booth. The operators had gone. Albani had gone. Dorothy had been taken home, shaken but safe. Only Lisa remained. Her hands were raw, trembling. Her sleeve was torn, revealing the Raven inked into her flesh. It seemed darker tonight, sharper, as if alive. She touched it gently, almost reverently. Once she had thought it was a curse, a mark that chained her forever to violence. But now, sitting in the quiet wreckage, she saw it differently. The Raven was not a curse. It was a promise. A promise she had kept in Aleppo. A promise she had kept tonight. A promise she would keep again if the world demanded it. Not for recognition, not for glory, not for vengeance. For trust. For the silent, unseen duty of guarding those who could not guard themselves. Her tears finally came, hot and silent, sliding down her cheeks. Because she knew what that meant. The Raven would never sleep again. The next morning, as dawn broke over Fort Campbell, the Silver Creek diner sat scarred but still standing. Workers swept glass from the sidewalk, patched the door, replaced the sign. Customers would return. Life would move forward. But those who had been there, would never forget what they saw. A quiet woman hiding in plain sight. A waitress, yes, but something far more. A raven. A guardian in the shadows. A silent protector who asked for nothing and gave everything. Lisa walked down the empty street, her jacket pulled tight, her stride steady. People might whisper, hunters might come, but she no longer feared it. She had made her choice, not by words but by action. The raven would fly as long as it had to. And that was enough. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.